In October 2025, a production line at a Volkswagen plant in Germany is in danger of grinding to a halt. At Mercedes-Benz, executives are scrambling, warning of imminent shutdowns. The European Automobile Manufacturers Association, which represents giants like BMW, Renault, and Stellantis, issues a stark warning of serious production stoppages. The entire European auto industry, the crown jewel of the continent's economy, is being held hostage. The culprit is not a massive engine or a complex chassis. It is a tiny semiconductor. A component that, just weeks earlier, cost less than 40 cents. This is not a random supply chain snag. It is a deliberate, strategic act. The entity blocking the shipment of this 40-cent chip is the Chinese government. But here is the twist that makes this a masterclass in strategy. The chip is not Chinese. It is European. The company that makes it, Nexperia, is headquartered in the Netherlands. Its main factories are in Germany and the United Kingdom. It is a European company, making European products for European customers. So how did China gain the power to stop a Dutch company from shipping its own European-made chips to its neighbors? This is not just a story about a trade dispute. It is the story of a brilliant, multi-year strategic gambit. A corporate maneuver so subtle, Europe didn't realize it was trapped until the cage door slammed shut. To understand how this happened, you need to know two names. The first is the target, Nexperia. If you've never heard of Nexperia, you are not alone. It does not make the glamorous, headline-grabbing chips that power AI or supercomputers. Nexperia is a spin-off of NXP Semiconductor's old Standard Products division. It makes the boring chips. These are called discrete components, transistors, diodes, and MOSFETs. If an advanced AI chip is a brilliant surgeon, Nexperia's chips are the blood cells, nerve endings, and muscle fibers. They are not the brain. They are the body. They manage power flow, switch currents, and perform millions of simple, essential tasks. A single electric vehicle can contain more than 1,300 of them. Your anti-lock brakes, your battery management system, your LED headlights, they all depend on these simple, high-volume components. Nexperia doesn't just make these chips. It dominates the market. In the European automotive sector, Nexperia supplies an estimated 40 to 50% of all such components. It is, quite simply, the bedrock of the entire industry's electronics. The second name is the predator, Wingtech technology. Wingtech is a Chinese manufacturing giant. In 2018, it began a quiet acquisition, finalizing a $3.6 billion deal to buy Nexperia. At the time, Western governments were focused on one thing: intellectual property. The United Kingdom, and later the United States, raised alarms about a Chinese company gaining access to advanced European semiconductor technology. But the Netherlands, Nexperia's home country, largely allowed the deal to proceed. They believed the company's brain, its research, its patents, and its most advanced factories remained safe on European soil. They were missing the real strategy. Wingtech wasn't just buying a company. It was setting a trap. This brings us to our central question: how did Wingtech technology turn the 2018 acquisition of a boring Dutch chip company into a geopolitical superweapon? How did it outsmart Europe's entire chip industry? That's the question we're answering today. To understand this strategy, we need to break down the three-step gambit that Wingtech executed. It starts with an insight that European leaders completely missed. In the global chip war, all the attention is on the high ground. The headlines are dominated by companies like Nvidia, AMD, and Intel, all racing to create chips with smaller and smaller transistors. 5 nanometer, 3 nanometer. The pursuit of ultimate computing power. This is the advanced or leading-edge market. Wingtech's strategy was to ignore this fight entirely. It targeted the low ground. This is the market for what are called legacy or mature chips. These are components built on older, less complex production processes. They are a commodity. They are cheap, reliable, and needed by the billions. While the US and Europe were obsessed with protecting the brains of the future, they forgot to protect the nervous system of today. Nexperia was the perfect target because it was boring. Its dominance in the auto industry provided a stable, massive revenue stream. But more importantly, its products are not easily replaceable. You cannot simply swap one 40-cent transistor for another in a car's braking system. Any new component must go through months, or even years, of rigorous qualification and testing to be certified as automotive grade. Production lines are built around these specific parts. This means that Nexperia's customers, like Volkswagen and BMW, were locked in. They had a deep, structural dependency on Nexperia's supply. Wingtech understood a critical secret of modern logistics. The most powerful position is not necessarily owning the most advanced technology. It is owning the component that everyone else needs, and that no one else can easily make at scale. Wingtech didn't buy a tech company. It bought a Chokepoint. And then, it spent the next 5 years quietly tightening its grip. This is the core of the strategy. When Wingtech bought Nexperia in 2018, European regulators were focused on the front end of production. Here's a simple breakdown of the semiconductor supply chain. First, there is front-end fabrication. This is the high-tech, glamorous part. It happens in massive, multi-billion-dollar foundries, or fabs. This is where silicon wafers are etched with complex circuits. Nexperia's front-end fabs were, and still are, located in Europe, primarily in Hamburg, Germany, and Manchester in the UK. This is the brain. Second, there is back-end assembly, testing, and packaging. This is the boring part. The finished wafers from Europe are shipped out, cut into individual chips, assembled into their plastic or ceramic casings, and tested. This is the hands and legs of the operation. It's the final, crucial step that turns a raw wafer into a usable product ready to be shipped to a customer. Before the acquisition, Nexperia's backend was spread across several locations. After the acquisition, Wingtech began a slow, methodical consolidation. It poured investment into Nexperia's massive, 80,000 square meter facility in the Chinese city of Dongguan. It integrated Nexperia's logistics directly into Wingtech's own vast Chinese manufacturing ecosystem. By 2025, the trap was set. While 100 of Nexperia's high-tech wafers were being fabricated in Europe, an estimated 70 to 80% of those wafers were then shipped to China for the final, mandatory step of assembly and packaging. From there, they would be exported to the world, including back to the European car factories that were often just a few hundred miles away from the original German fab. European regulators had successfully protected the brain. They had allowed Wingtech to quietly take control of the hands. Wingtech's strategy was never about stealing the intellectual property. It was about gaining control of the physical path to the customer. They had created a deliberate, hidden dependency. And for 5 years, no one in Europe seemed to notice. Until Europe decided to fight back. By 2024, the geopolitical winds had shifted. The US had put Wingtech on its entity list, flagging it as a national security risk. The Dutch government, under intense pressure from its allies, was having second thoughts about the acquisition. They began an investigation. What they found was, allegedly, a misuse of financial resources by Wingtech's CEO, Zhong Shuezheng. They accused him of governance failures that threatened Nexperia's stability. The Dutch government was now convinced that Wingtech was a threat. They believed Wingtech was planning to move Nexperia's high-value European front-end production to China, effectively stealing the brain. So, on September 30, 2025, the Dutch government made its move. It invoked a Goods Availability Act, a rarely used, Cold War-era law, to effectively seize control of Nexperia's Dutch headquarters. A Dutch court suspended the Wingtech-appointed CEO. The government placed the company's management under its own oversight. In the minds of European leaders, they had reclaimed their asset. They had saved their critical chip industry from Chinese control. They had seized the brain and cut out the Chinese parent company. They thought they had won. In reality, they had just walked directly into Wingtech's trap. What happened next was the climax of this 5-year strategic gambit. China's response was not a series of angry diplomatic protests. It was not a complex lawsuit in international court. It was a simple, devastating countermove. Just days after the Dutch government seized the Nexperia HQ, China's Ministry of Commerce announced new export restrictions. It banned the export of Nexperia products from the Nexperia facilities in China. The trap sprung shut. The aha moment is this: Europe had seized the company's brain in the Netherlands. But Wingtech, via the Chinese government, controlled the hands in Dongguan. And the hands refused to ship the product. The entire supply chain froze. The wafers from the German fab were now piling up, but the 70 to 80% of products that needed to be packaged in China were blocked. This created immediate, global chaos. Automakers in Europe, Japan, and North America were hit simultaneously. Honda had to halt production at its plant in Mexico. Stellantis and Mercedes warned of imminent shutdowns. Prices for those boring 40-cent chips surged by over 1,000% on the open market as panic buying set in. The Dutch government was left holding a brain in a jar, a company headquarters that owned the patents, and factories that could make the raw wafers, but no physical way to get the finished product to its most important customers. The stalemate was perfect. The Dutch-controlled HQ then tried to hit back by halting its own wafer shipments to its Chinese plant, citing non-payment. It didn't matter. The company was now severed in two. And China was the one holding the finished goods. And that was the secret. Wingtech's acquisition was never just about owning the intellectual property. It was a supply chain gambit. By patiently and quietly moving the boring but essential final step of the supply chain onto its own territory, Wingtech turned Europe's own company into a strategic chokepoint against it. China didn't need to steal the technology. It just had to control the on switch for the assembly line. Europe thought the battle was about who designed the chip. Wingtech proved the battle was about who shipped the chip. It was a masterclass in geopolitical jujitsu. If you're getting value from this breakdown and just had your own aha moment, do us a small favor, hit the like button and make sure you're subscribed. We spend weeks researching these strategies so you can learn them in minutes. It's the best way to support the channel and help us unlock more strategies. The crisis was so severe, it was finally resolved only after the highest levels of diplomacy, including talks between the US and Chinese presidents in early November 2025. In the end, China agreed to grant exemptions and allow some exports to resume. In exchange, the Dutch government signaled it was ready to shelve its order to seize the company. The message was clear. China had proven its point. It had demonstrated its leverage, and it had won the standoff. The brilliance of this strategy is what it teaches us about 21st century industrial power. For decades, the West believed that power came from owning the intellectual property. The designed in California or engineered in Germany stamp was the ultimate source of value. The manufacturing, the boring assembly, was just a low-margin cost to be outsourced to the cheapest location. Wingtech's strategy proves this model is now dangerously obsolete. The true lesson of the Nexperia Gambit is that in a globalized system, logistics is leverage. The boring parts of the supply chain, the assembly, the packaging, the testing, are no longer just a cost. They are the new strategic high ground. Power is not just about who invents a product. It is about who controls its physical path to the customer. China has spent the last 2 decades positioning itself as the back end for the entire world. And as Europe just learned the hard way, when you give someone else control of your hands, you give them the power to choke you. If you learn something new, Hit the like button and subscribe for more strategy breakdowns. And let us know in the comments, what company's strategy should we unlock next?